Good evening. I'm going to call to order the February 18th, 2025 meeting of the Town of Auburn Fire Station Building Committee. This meeting is being recorded and broadcast. I'd like to ask if anybody else is recording the meeting. Okay. First item on the agenda, meeting minutes from our last meeting. I did send those out pretty late today. I don't know if everybody's had a chance to look at them. If so, I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve.
Okay. Second.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. Item number 3. Some feedback on the design charrette from our architect here from Tecton.
Thank you very much. So I did forward out last week a summary that we had put together that incorporated all the comments received. There was about 50 plus respondents, both online and in person from that evening. Sort of ran the gamut from love it to hate it. Lot concerns about costs, need as to why the station is needed, things like that. So a lot of questions that were generated. I think some of those questions have been answered in previous presentations, and we can continue to answer some of those questions moving forward. But the bottom line is there was no sort of prime consensus that we can find through those, and that's pretty typical with these processes. So I invite all you committee members to sort of digest that information and make your best determination on how you feel best to move forward. But we did put together some summaries that capture some of the overall themes. The 3 primary questions that we had is one on building aesthetic and how the character of the architecture fits within the town. The second being on the overall site design, and the third on the building design, in particular, the aesthetics of it. Overall, on aesthetics, if we were to distill this down into what we had shown was a series of images of other precedent examples in the Commonwealth and in Northern Connecticut, sort of within a 1-hour drive of here, from very modern to very traditional to residential scaled. Sort of the leaning theme was that the Lexington, Massachusetts fire station was sort of the preferred aesthetic from the various examples that we had provided. In terms of the site design, the main summary is that they like the opportunity of future expansion. There were some concerns on traffic and accessibility off of Prospect Street, which we've all discussed numerous occasions, made adjustments to as a result of, but certainly that'll be an ongoing concern that we'll need to continue to address. And that the size didn't seem large enough, or that the site wasn't centralized enough. And I think we've discussed that on multiple occasions in terms of there's 2 stations for response. This location was considered primarily because of its ability to provide the most, the fastest response time, which is the most critical component when you're looking at a site selection for a fire station. And then on the design, some suggested that maybe a lighter palette or some sustainable design features should be certainly considered. And there were some concerns about the aesthetic being a little bit too modern. So let's dig down into some more poignant examples that we had put together. So on the first slide, this is looking at examples of other recent fire stations in the area. And we had asked essentially to rank a first, second, and third choice based on these examples with additional comments for the respondents to provide. Here's a summary of some of the more prominent quotes that we pulled together. Several of them addressing the aesthetic of the Lexington Fire Station, saying that the design fits with other town buildings, that it reminds them of the Millbury Station, looks inviting and fits in with the town. And some others noted that the classic look of Bloomfield or Greenfield fire seemed to be more desirable. There were some notes on liking the look of the brick. That some of the Lexington and Greenfield fire stations were well lit. So altogether, the overwhelming preference was towards the aesthetic of Lexington's fire headquarters. On the site design in particular, here are some of the comments that we received. Again, concerns with traffic, especially around Prospect Street. There were some comments about not preferring the location. I think that's fairly well settled since this site was procured for this purpose. There was some folks did like the fact of the future space and the incorporation of public space into this. And that the site had room for expansion. It could certainly house a police station in the future. In terms of the building aesthetic, this is where we showed a series of renderings and asked just generally, what do you like or dislike about the current building design? And again, as I noted at the beginning, it sort of ran the gamut of love it to hate it. Some noted that it was too modern looking, where others said that it had a 1970s aesthetic. So, both too futuristic, but not futuristic enough. Some noted that they would like it to have more of a New England style. But others recognize that there isn't really a consistent design vocabulary within the town of Auburn. But that this aesthetic seemed to fit the character of the neighborhood well better than a traditional New England building would look like. Certainly echoing some of the concerns of the committee was some comments about not liking the angled roof at the front of the building. There was some comments about liking the amount of natural light and the amount of windows on the exterior. There were also several comments saying that there were too many windows on the exterior. So again, it sort of ran the gamut and sort of take what you see and let me know your thoughts on that. So that's kind of the summary of everything. And like I said, I have forwarded the grand list of all of the comments received to date. And this is just sort of a summary snapshot of them distilled down. So, happy to take any comments or questions you have or general thoughts. But I think what we sort of need, from the design standpoint, working up to town meeting, having another future community conversation, is some direction from the committee as to how we want to take this information and sort of move forward with either enhancements to the design, revisions, or sort of stay in the course. So sort of happy to engage in that conversation, but I think we need some direction on how the committee sees this moving forward.
So there are, I think, two common threads that I kind of take out of this. One, most people are looking for a gable roof. But I do know that might present cost issues for the plan that we have today. I assume that's probably not feasible.
Yeah, the flat roof obviously was try to reduce costs associated with the building.
Right. Yeah. So, okay. And then I do think, if the comments on the lighter color scheme, I assume that really doesn't have an impact on anything because if you look at the two schools we've built, in the past 20 years now, they both kind of have a similar, lighter brick. It's brick and concrete and similar to what I think we're proposing here, just in a yellow and pink color instead of a darker brown.
The coloration of brick is easily,
Yeah.
I mean, we could figure that out pretty quickly. Just to be crystal clear, that the administration portion of the building would be the roof that would have more of a pitch. The apparatus would still be similar. If you look at any one of those buildings that they described that they loved, it's the main headquarters that gives you the pitched roof to give you that look of architectural features. Most apparatus bays are typically flat roofs.
And I'll tell you that we do have a gabled roof over the apparatus bays in Lexington. It's only on the first 30 feet or so. Otherwise, that peak would be 30 feet taller than it is now. It would be massive. And in order to achieve that, we needed a 48, it was actually 52-inch deep girder that ran across that to pick up the roof load across the span, and that is extremely expensive.
Yeah.
But you can still, well, I guess my point was, you could still get the architectural features at the admin, just doing that roof line a little differently and keeping the apparatus, because the apparatus, although it faces both streets, no matter how you look at it, it's less obtrusive, I guess is the word I want to use, facing the street with the admin area.
Yeah, it's kind of tucked back. It's not really in the public way.
That's my point.
What about a facade? Not a real roof, but just a
Like a shroud.
yeah.
We could do that. Yeah, sort of like a short mansard or something like that, kind of like an old west kind
False roof,
of detail.
Yeah, I mean there would be no ceiling on it. It would just be a
When we do that, and I've done it on a number of different facilities, is that you always worry about snow load. So we're gonna have to think about like the capacity at how it drifts, and you know whether we do heat melt along those locations to the drain. I mean, those are all things that I guess what Matt's alluding to, and I'll cut to the chase, is that he needs direction as to like some of the comments that came through from the committee, which direction to go, because it's not only going to affect costs, it's going to affect how our public forums are going to be
Yep.
done over the next, and I'm going to get into that a little bit later. But I think, part of the charrette also indicated the solar potential with that roof, and the pitch could have been changed. That was some of the discussion, but we didn't want to really articulate that yet until we knew, does the town really want a gable roof, or is a flat roof pitched in a different manner acceptable? So I guess we are both looking for direction from the committee as to how you'd like to proceed.
And just to put a finer point on a piece of that too is when we're talking about the solar capacity of the roof. Right, if we make this one big gable,
You only get half, right?
versus reversing this pitch like that and keeping it still low slope, we're actually reducing the solar capacity by half.
Right.
So it's just something to consider with that as well. Not trying to influence it one way or the other. We'll do it either way, but
Just a question, Matt, regarding that roof. Regardless of what way that roof is pitched, isn't there solar capacity above the apparatus floor? And you
Yes.
wouldn't even have to worry about that other roof, the admin roof?
Yeah, you can make solar capacity almost anything. It's just a matter of the supports and you're building it and supporting it on. So
yep.
it obviously with a gable roof, it's a little more challenging because of the elevations. That's all.
I mean, I know on both schools, they just did solar on the flat roofs. And to me, even aesthetically, I would rather see the solar go above the apparatus bay where it's not seen versus slap solar on, sort of the shingle.
the front. The main thing you see is solar panels. Yeah.
Going to achieve the same thing with the solar, but aesthetically, I think one is better than the other.
Yep.
And you have more surface area on the apparatus bay roof, right?
Yeah.
You'll have equipment up there too. So, I mean,
Yeah. So
I mean, one of the original designs had a gable roof, if I recall, and we talked about that in length. But when the back half of the station changed, I remember you saying it just didn't make sense to carry that for half of the admin area and then not the whole thing. And with us reducing that space, I don't really see how you could do a gable end and have that make sense.
It'll be tricky.
Yeah, and I think one of the most interesting comments was it fits the neighborhood, right? Like
Right.
we're trying to incorporate the whole town, but it really does fit the neighborhood. We've talked about that in length. Every building around there is similar. I don't know. I would say we keep it.
how easy would it be to take that exact upper left quadrant and re-render it in a lighter color?
easy.
Easy. Very, yeah.
That might be the first thing to look at, is if, I don't know, go look at the middle school, and just make it look like that. But, same design, just different color. And I think that would be the first thing that would let us
We will
Probably
we will
make
show
a
you
decision.
both.
Okay.
We'll do the lighter color as it is with this, and then we'll do another one showing you what a gable roof would be. And to be frankly honest, in order to get the proportions right, it's probably going to be a combination of the gable roof and some additional flat roof. I think that's going to be the way to make the magic work for this thing. The other piece we talked about previously too is the fire department provided some additional feedback on the floor plan recently, so we did make some plan tweaks, and we can run through some of those today.
Okay.
The one that we haven't incorporated yet was there was a request to shift this roof access here and switch it with the mechanical and electric rooms that are on the top there. Once we do that, the building mass is going to build out over here. So this sort of element is going to go away. It's going to become more of the facade, which I think
that'll
of
look
any
better.
part of the building that receives one-sided comments and not balance comments. It was that piece that received several negative comments and no positive comments. So I think that's an element we can certainly dial back, and I think the plan moves associated with that will aid in that.
But that portion, Matt, and you know, having looked at and done a number of buildings, that breaks up the mass,
It does.
the architectural feature, and when that's going to be lit at night, it's going to be a very handsome building. I'm not saying, you know, it can't be tweaked based on some of the commentary, but you know, I understand, you know, people are looking at that saying, you know, what is that atrium section? But I think, you know, it can be conducive to separation of the masses as well, to give it a little bit of a breakup, that's all.
I think it would be interesting to see, because I know some of the, you know, you get comments of these look really nicely lit. Well, our rendering is a daytime rendering. The Lexington is a nighttime or a twilight rendering, right?
Yep.
And so it would probably also be useful to see, you know, like a twilight rendering of that.
Lighter colors.
Yeah, with the lighter colors and something similar, so we can kind of compare to the same image that you have for the Lexington one.
So the kicker on all of this, and the reason why Matt's leaning in that direction to try to figure out, you know, a recommendation for him to move forward with, is that my goal is to, by the third week of March, have a public forum, and then another one the third week of April, giving us 2 weeks to be able to prepare any of the feedback and commentary for town meeting. So over the next 2 to 3 weeks, we want to refine this so that our next public forum, you know, any of the feedback, we can really hone into a final design, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think, you know, what we want to be able to do is put in front of the town, like,
Consistency.
yeah, here's kind of what it's going to look like, not like here's an idea that might be or it might change after, you know, like when we go to town meeting, we need to have a design, an aesthetic to it, you know, and so, but I think if we can get, you know, a couple options to look at prior to the next meeting, you know, maybe we can make a decision, March 3rd, I guess, would be our next meeting.
Yeah.
Of say, hey, this is what, and I really do think if we lighten up the color scheme, like everybody's gonna look at it and say, oh, that seems like an Auburn building.
And give you a twilight look.
Yeah, and give a twilight look.
Yeah.
Don't make it too fancy though, right? Because we don't.
No, that's not a problem. In our, I've got staff lined up to put together these
Okay.
edits for the middle to end of next week. So we should have that enough time for you to review it and have a good conversation for that meeting on the 3rd.
Would one of them show more of a gable roof?
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm going to do a rendering. I'm going to do a rendering with this scheme, both nighttime and with a lighter palette. And I'm going to do a second design with a gable roof option, showing them both as like that as well.
Would a hip roof with gable dormers be a better look based on the size?
I'm just curious, one thing from the professionals room, like, was that a pretty good response relative to the first go at having a public input? And although there was no definitive, and I think that's my next point is, you know, there was no definitive, we want everything this way. It sounds like you had kind of a wide variety of replies. But I think the most common reply I think I've seen across some of the social media stuff has been sort of applauding this group and the fire department and the architects and others is to be sort of aware of the costs behind it.
We didn't have the cost, remember, at the charrette.
We didn't have the cost, but we did have program space and things of that nature. So my concern would be if we do any changes is clearly to show if there's a cost increase. If the flat roof was done because that is cost savings, I think that's going to be more appreciated than any palette change or angle of a roof. If those taxpayers say, you made this decision, I don't love it, but I
can live with it.
I can
Yeah.
certainly appreciate it if you're looking to save the taxpayer
We'll
dollars.
give you the differential between the two.
I think the other question on that same front would be if we go gable. I know we were talking metal roof. You know, does that change? You know, depending on some of the options that we're considering, where you wouldn't be able to necessarily do metal, or does that have any impact to it? I guess.
Metal roof is a little bit more money, but it's the longevity of the product as well.
Right.
I think, you know, depending on the architectural details that Matt's team comes up with, we'll be able to definitively say, you know, a metal roof does make sense or an asphalt roof makes sense on that particular location. So I think once you give us a couple of dynamics on that, we can probably, it's not hard to show both.
No, it's not. And alternatively, that's a very easy one to bid as an alternate.
Yeah.
So we can certainly do a base bid of asphalt shingles and ask contractors to provide a price for our metal roof.
Because I do know we communicated as one of the goals of the committee was we want to keep the maintenance costs as low as possible. And that was one of the considerations. And that was pretty well received, I think, to say, hey, you know what, we're okay spending a little bit more on a metal roof than having to replace a shingle roof every
And that
15
would only
years.
be on the admin area.
Right. Everything else is
To be
flat.
crystal clear,
Yeah.
Everything else is
Yeah.
rubber roof, so
So, okay.
Sonafill.
Any other questions? Comments? Okay. Thanks.
Yep.
All right.
Do you have any?
Well, Matt, did you say you had some
yeah.
program stuff that changes to show or?
Oh, yeah.
I said the
Oh.
same thing.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, let me jump over to the plans. And there's a kind of a good lead in on this about saving money, right? So we received some comments from the fire department through Joe's team on a couple of tweaks they were looking for the plans. We sent them to the fire department. I haven't seen any comments on the review that they've done on the revisions yet. So I expect there'll be a few more tweaks down the road. But essentially, we addressed 3 areas of the building. 2 of them were rearrangements, and 1 of them was about reducing square footage. So the first piece about reducing square footage, we have effectively reduced 300 square feet out of the training room. And what we did is reduce the overall capacity from 75 to 60,
62, I think.
62, and adding a room divider in it so that it allows for a little bit more flexibility. So what you're seeing here is that reduction in overall square footage of the training room. And then you see here in dashed a second set of tables and chairs. So this is showing an arrangement in full capacity of the room, and then room divider, sort of a folding partition that can close that off and make it into 2 separate training rooms. So adds a little bit more flexibility for the fire department or for the community's use. And we also took 300 square feet out of there. We also reduced a good chunk of square footage equally. So this wall sort of came plan east, and then equally, we also pulled this wall in as well and reduced the overall capacity of the fitness room. So I think altogether we reduced about 450, 500 square feet from the building. So considerable dollars saved there without sacrificing much.
That reduces the future space on top by the same amount, right?
Correct.
So, okay.
Yes.
Does that give us about 4,500 then for that piece?
Yeah.
'Cause I think, okay.
Yep, right around there. The other thing we did is we simply rearranged a number of the administrative spaces. So previously we had EMS, lieutenant, captain. The chief had a corner office over here, deputy chief, chief. There was a meeting room between them, and then fire prevention was up in the corner. We moved fire prevention right next to the EMS walk-off room. That office tends to have the most public foot traffic, so it made sense to keep that right near the entrance in the vestibule. Lieutenant's office, captain's office, the EMS coordinator, chief's in the corner here, and then a meeting room in the deputy's chief's office. We also made some tweaks over to the decon space. We originally had the gear extractor and gear dryer in this corner, and then we had lockers over here. We moved the gear extractor and gear dryer directly off of the entrance to the decontamination space, and then the gross decon shower is directly right over here.
It's direct feedback from the department, just because how they come off of an event, come out of the apparatus and be able to get rid of their contaminated clothes initially and then get into what they need.
Yep. On the second floor, so one area that we haven't yet worked on here is this roof access piece and switching that with mechanical and electrical room. So we're going to flip flop these two. Pretty simple change, not too much to discuss on that one. The other piece we did is we wanted to increase the living quarters over here, the living, dining, and kitchen area, without adding square footage to the building. They wanted to have a few more seats at the day room, and they wanted a few more seats at the dining room table. We did that by extending the floor area here over the lobby. So if you recall,
Skew a little bit.
yeah, on the ground floor, this wall here kicks up at an angle mirroring Prospect Street and the apparatus bays. On the second floor, we just sort of squared that off to give them a little bit more space in those. It adds no real increase in cost except for a little bit of extra concrete for the extension of the slab. Our structural system below this is orthogonal to this portion of the building, so it's not like we're adding some different beam angle or something like that that's going to try to take that load. It's already worked into the structure. That was a pretty low cost change that increased the amount of space that the fire department had usable. So simply just change the configuration of the kitchen a little bit. They wanted to add some pantry space, which they didn't have in the previous plan. Again, increase the size of the dining table and increase the amount of seating in the living quarters, just to match the amount of crews, the amount of staff that's going to be on a crew shift.
Looking at it from a mechanical side, why do you want to flip-flop the mechanical room to the front of the building?
They wanted to have the roof rack on the, it's not south side, but on the opposite side, because that would be facing the street area. And I can go over detail exactly the parameters around that.
Okay, I'm just thinking as, obviously that we don't know what's going in there yet, but if anything is coming up through the roof, you're going to have that coming on the front side of the building now instead of the back side of the building.
Yep.
That's got to be worked out. 100%.
Other questions?
So that glass goes away then at the second floor?
Correct. Yep. Yeah, so we'll find it, to Joe's point, it does do a really nice job of sort of breaking up the two masses, but I think
still do that.
we can achieve that architecturally.
Substantial glass or something, so
Yeah.
from the outside it looks
We could, yeah.
a little nicer?
Yeah.
Just mechanical?
Yeah, I would, depending on how, what mechanical system we end up going with or something like that, I'm sure there'll be some louvers or something like that we'll have to accommodate. And if we went with a spandrel system, we could unitize, some louvers into that pretty reasonably.
Light in there as well.
And then below that on the first floor is going to be open, you said?
No, below
Still be
here on the first floor is where the radio room is.
Oh, okay.
Other questions? Okay. All right. Thanks. Next up, OPM updates.
Sure, I want to go over a few things with you. So we went over the charrette, we went over the drawing updates. The financial update, I provided everybody with a budget. We went in front of the select board and just discussed the probability or possibility of utilizing some of the free cash. They were unanimously in favor of trying to reduce the cost for the taxpayers, which we got a set value of about $5 million. Is that the number? And we're going in front of the finance committee just to present to them and discuss and hopefully get their support on it as well as far as tomorrow night. One of the things that they, during the charrette, and they were asking about cost, but at the select board meeting, they wanted us to make sure that we could definitively see what the impact to the taxpayer would be. The chief's been working diligently, not only with, finding out what the use of free cash or any impact at all, which there would be none towards your rating. But he also looked at what the values were and did a pretty detailed spreadsheet on that. So we'll be able to utilize that information and provide it in the trifold that we can send out to the residents and have them grab. Some of the updated questions from the charrette, I'd like to make sure that collaboratively the committee and the chief and their team puts together the most frequent asked questions that we can provide answers to. So the one thing it's challenging is the word I want to use, is that, the same questions will get asked even though the information is being put out there. I just want to make sure we're identifying that specifically, especially if the same question is asked 15 times. I want to make sure we get it out and provide a clear, definitive answer on that. And I think those public forums, we should be able to do that really carefully and tactfully and essentially transparently, so everybody feels comfortable with how we're going to be doing and what we're doing moving forward. I did express to the select board and the chief, and I'm going to express it again to the committee, the tariffs that are currently in place, are having a little bit of effect, even though nothing's been awarded yet. It's like anything else when they say costs are going to go up on anything. And it's not just the structural steel, it's any of the steel, aluminum, all of the copper components that might be within any of the electrical and mechanical systems may be affected. We're showing right now and I met with our estimating group just to talk it through. It's like a 0.5% on steel. So it's not significant, but it's something. And we're going to track that. I'm hoping the activities that happen over the next 6 months, it's posturing so that we can get better value for, whatever he's trying to do with these tariffs. And it kind of neutralizes. The other aspect of it is we may want to do some early purchases, early packages for some of this stuff. So the sooner the design is ready after we get, approval at town meeting, the earlier we can start to put these packages together and maybe get early bid packages out, so that will save the project money over a certain period of time. Those long lead items we were talking about, switch gears, generators, structural steel, any mechanical systems that might, see a significant increase over the next 3 to 6 months. The trifold information, we really, by March 3rd, I'm hoping that we can at least identify, the 10 or 12 or 15 questions along with the financial impact that we're going to be showing. Some of the questions that I saw during the shred is, the need for the fire station. I think you've done that. You've done a phenomenal job. The reasons why you need the building. I think we need to bring it home on the public forum, the one in March and April, to really, and that's why I think the demographics of the town, we need to go to a couple different locations, because you need to hit wherever they are to let them know, what the impacts are and some of the information that we're trying to provide to them.
Just a comment on that. Could we consider using the middle school as one of the public forum sites, and then you could just walk everybody over here?
Yeah, I think we can probably, over the next day or so, we'll hone those locations. I know the chief's been working with a lot of different groups, talking with a lot of, I want to say it was American Legion was a group that you're trying to find out.
Yeah, we're trying to get like the Elks, the Legion.
Yeah, the Elks.
The Masons, we're trying to pin down some dates so we can kind of do some things at their buildings.
Yeah.
For their members.
And the seniors are important, because they're probably the most concerned about any impact on any type of increase on. So and the last thing I'm just going to bring up is that we're looking to have borings and test pits done on Friday of this coming week. Matt's office put together a rough locations of where these test pits and borings are going to be. I'm going to probably need some assistance from the DPW on the test pits, but I also might need them to help clear some of the site to get the drill rig in place.
They're all set.
Oh, they are, great. The other portion of it is the locality of the borings and test pits are approximate locations. The survey is not going to be able to get out there in time, so between the chief, us, and the designer, and maybe the DPW, if we could put some cones out. He's given us some specific measurements off of certain property lines. We should be able to scale that out pretty quickly to have that done for Friday. It seems like hopefully, knock on wood, the weather holds off and we're able to get that done, but I'll keep you posted as we move closer to it. Connor's been working closely with the geotech group coming in and the boring, and we'll try to have that happen. And that was the last item I was bringing to your attention.
Questions?
We're gonna notify anyone about the test pits, borings?
As far as it's an open site, and they're really not, it shouldn't be affecting anywhere other than the proximity of building location. We're doing apparatus bay, admin area, just for gradation and soil conditions more than anything. So I don't think, DigSafe has already been notified, so most of that is being done as we speak. We didn't notify any of the butters, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, I meant like for the town, because we're gonna see equipment out there, a drill rig is.
And maybe we can just email. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
And then as far as just back to the timeline here, so with the vote, late spring, when would we be in a position, you think, to do the early packages based on the design?
Magic question, Matt. So it's typically, and I've pinned, Jeff and Matt have been, great to work with. We figured about 10 months from the time you got approval to get a rough set of drawings. So typically, early packages, we're starting to understand the systems around design development to 75% drawings. Typically, I like early packages to go out around 75% because we already know the mechanical and structural aspects of it. But you can elaborate from that point. I'm just giving you my insight on it.
Yeah, no, I would concur with that. We just did something very similar in Peabody for their police station, and we did at 30% drawings. We did an early site package. That's because we had blasting and we were across the street from middle school. And then at between 60 and 75%, we went out for bid for switchgear generator, some of the other long lead electrical componentry for the building, structural steel, and a few others. So that's around when we would want to do that. We wouldn't want to do it too early. We would just be at risk for maybe backing ourselves into a hole, especially with electrical stuff. We really need to understand the entire impact of the building systems, and it takes a little while to develop that. So if we're looking at 75%, and we're talking about probably a June start to get into the production effort, we're looking around October, November timeframe, and probably have those bid packages in hand after the first of the year.
Okay. And that our budget that we talked about, that have escalation through that timeline?
Yeah.
And there it did. Okay.
Yeah,
Awesome.
through midpoint of construction.
Oh, great. Awesome. Thank you.
Welcome.
Are there other questions? Comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not a question, but I just want to follow up a little more on Joe's report about the financials, and just to let the committee know that Mark and Greg and Joe were before the Board of Selectmen this past Monday to present the financial plan, which would call for or the request to utilize potentially $5 million from free cash, which would bring the borrowing amount to $25 million. Although the board did not take a vote on it that night, I think that there was widespread support across from the board members. They all spoke positively on it. The plan, regardless, was to go to the finance committee to speak with them about it. But purposely, the board did not take a position because they want the finance committee to weigh in on it. And sort of, I guess, surprisingly, one of the questions that came out of that meeting was, what does the financial impact look like if we potentially used more than $5 million from free cash? And the number that was thrown out that night was 8. What if we used 8 instead of 5? We did check with Unibank. Even using that portion would not affect the bond rating. And we do have the numbers that we'll be presenting to the finance committee tomorrow as well. So ultimately, tomorrow, what we're looking for out of the finance committee is to see if there is support from the finance committee to create a financial strategy that would utilize a portion of free cash anywhere from 5 to, we'll call it 8, because that's that was the number that the selectmen threw out. We have numbers right down to 20 million from Unibank. So if we were to potentially use 10 million from free cash, and we have those numbers at every $1 million equivalent. So if we borrowed 20, 21, 22, so on, we have what the financial impact is on an annual basis. So there's more to come on that. So I think the timeline as far as the financial strategy, just to kind of sum it up with what Joe's talking about, even with the trifold, is the hope is that we can potentially get a position and a vote out of a recommendation out of finance committee tomorrow, which will then allow us to go back to the board at their next meeting, report back to whatever position finance took, get the BOS to either support or go with a different direction potentially. And then that will finalize the financial strategy that will allow us to talk a little more confidently and intelligently to what the borrowing strategy would be, not only in the public forums but in the trifolds. So,
And to add to the chief's point, to be crystal clear, we thoroughly and explained the impact of when it would actually hit the town. And the time frame isn't in 26 or 27 because the short-term borrowing that we're going to be doing during that period of time, I believe it was 2028 that we were talking around the date that the first impact would happen on that, and it would all depend on what they're willing to utilize out of free cash to reduce the overall costs.
Yeah.
So
And then
that was good news.
yeah, and then basically the more free cash the town can put in, the lower the borrowing, the lower the tax impact would be. So it's really now a discussion. I think it was very positively received of, we're in a position to do this, to keep the tax impact as low as possible. And now it's just, what's the number? And maybe a little bit about where it comes from, because there's free cash, there's stabilization fund. There's a lot more free cash than stabilization, so it probably would all come there. But that's also, I think, up for the finance committee to kind of recommend, as well as, I don't know if there's benefits to, like, if we take a little out of stabilization and then put it back, does that make us look better than just letting it sit there, or things like that, right? So that would be a consideration, but really it's just down to, like, what is the final number going to be? And I think once we get that, that allows us to prepare, hey, this is the, from now until the vote, this is the number, this is the, the impact, we'll be able to have that all in one place and shout it from the rooftops, I guess. So.
And as I explained to the select board, I give credit to the town of Auburn, because you're in a great position to be able to utilize, and that's what that infrastructure is all about for your capital expenses that you're using it for, and being able to reduce it. You're the second town in 6 months that's use that strategy and successfully have been able to get a building done under that those parameters. So I commend the town for their financial stability.
Okay. Other questions on project?
Just administratively, if the finance committee tomorrow votes to use additional funds, does that go back to us to vote to move forward with that, or does that?
I think actually we can just sort of agree that we've made a recommendation of up to five, but if ultimately it's the board of selectmen or the select board that would decide,
Right.
What that amount is and what would go on the warrant, right? So if the finance committee came back and said, we think 8 is a great number, and then we would take that, we'll take that to the next board of selectmen and say, finance committee thinks 8's the right number. I think we're all in agreement that as long as it's at least 5, then we're fine. I don't think anybody here is opposed to, if there's more non-borrowed money available to put towards this. So yeah. I think we would just say, hey, it's, this is what the finance committee recommends. So, take a vote on it, and then we'll know.
And Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, just borrowing that $5 million saved over $1.7 million in interest. Is that what
I think it was 1.8.
1.8? I knew it was over 1.8.
Yeah, correct. It was 1.8 by just utilizing the 5. But even right now, if we were to just use $5 million from stabilization, and we look at a $25 million borrowing, on the average home, which is valued at $420,000, it would be $216 annually. There is and then even if we were to just utilize an additional $1 million, so if we were to use 6, that drives the number under 200. It brings the number to 195. And there's about a $60 difference going right down to the $10 million mark. Now, do I anticipate that there's going to be a recommendation on either side to do 10 million? I don't. I don't. I think 8 is probably the realistic cap. But even at 8, that puts that borrowing at about 179. It puts it at about $179 a year at the 8.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think just the impression from the discussion that I got is, we have a certain amount of free cash available. 8 is probably about what they'd want to spend out of that and still hang on to other things in case there are future needs, where free cash might, help, like opportunistic things like buying the Prospect Street property was, a thing because we had the cash, because of the way we managed the policies. So, so I wouldn't expect to get 10. I think that would be a lot out of, what we have. But I think 8 was definitely a number that was seriously being considered. So.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, it's important for the committee to know and the public as a whole too, is one of the reasons why I think that they're interested in entertaining this discussion on not only the 5 million, but potentially going to 8 is since we borrowed the 4.6, more than half of that has already been restored back to stabilization with returns and all that. So more than half of the cost of the 4.6 has already been returned back to the stabilization fund. So the return on rate is good, which is why I think that they're okay with this concept of utilizing, a portion of that stabilization.
Other questions? Comments? Great. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Next up, any other discussion topics for the committee that, I know we're starting to think about meeting with, having various public forums, starting to socialize, communicate. I think, we've talked a little bit, kind of timelines of, I think maybe by the next meeting, we probably should have all of our information finalized, right? So building, what it's basically going to look like, financing, all of that should be organized. And then it's really about pulling that together into digestible content that we can, get out to as many people as possible. I think we should probably start thinking about, and I think we have started thinking about, like, who should we be meeting with, where, I think there's, certainly, outreach we can do online. There's outreach we can do in person. I know the suggestion was made, maybe we could camp the high school gym for basketball on Saturdays with, so I'm thinking there's probably, in addition to a trifold, maybe we have a, posterized version of that we could set up shop at various places in the mall or in the, at a basketball Saturday or,
Too late for that.
Any major event coming up?
I was gonna say, I think we're too late
We're
for
in the spring
basketball.
sports. Be ready to be at softball, baseball, soccer.
Yeah.
Well, we could camp out at Pappas. I mean, that's.
The craft fair and basketball game is coming up in March.
Yeah, I think there is a.
Having a
craft
table
fair.
is a good way to just get your message out there with some boards.
Yep.
And then having the pamphlets handed out and showing the cost impacts, we'll have those numbers by then. It just reinforces, your transparency that you're putting out there.
Yeah, and just the consistency of message, I think,
Yep.
is what we're, looking to develop by next meeting. So, I mean, I think we're open to brainstorming other ideas, to get out in front. But I do think that it's going to be important that we just blanket the town with the information, at the library, at the, at wherever people are going to be congregated, craft fairs, sporting events, I don't know, things like that, high school events, those kinds of things, town hall. Yeah. And just, wherever people are congregating, I think is where we want to at some point be able to just put some posters up and say, this is the information. If you have any questions, please ask. Right. So.
Greg, I think just about every public building and commercial building has one of these running some sort of messaging. If we can get on their rotation of, even if it's a slide, just to make people an awareness thing that this project is here and these are some of the things. It's all great to say we're all going to go, volunteer and stand out at 400 events come this spring, but it may not be the reality. But if we can put a nice presentation together that runs on a loop somewhere at all the schools and in the lobbies, and reach out to the Chamber of Commerce and ask them to run some stuff in their lobbies. And
We've filmed each of those events that we have, those public forums moving forward, and then having those run, because some of the questions I could ask between Matt, myself, and the chief and our team, it puts a lot of clarity into some of the misconceptions that might be out there when those questions are asked, and then it's retaped and played over for the people who weren't in attendance. So just take that under consideration.
Any other topics to discuss today? Okay. Are there any public comments? Okay. With that, next meeting would be Monday, March 3rd, here, 5:30. And I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. All right, we are adjourned.